part 2 of the server testing sprint. Okay, so much like we did up here when we are creating a user, we need to simply follow the same process, right? So when we go, sorry, I'm going to respond to one thing on Slack that needs my attention real quick from a student. Okay. Okay, should be good. All right, okay, so let's work on our get users, right? So what we need to do is create our test suite. So we're gonna basically do the same type of thing, but instead of calling .post, we're gonna call a get on our users. I'm gonna make sure I have your Slack channel up now that these are here. And then I just wanna make sure, let's see, I think I can do this. Mute all participants. Y'all are muted. Cool. All right. Here we go. Back at it. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to, instead of calling, so we're going to basically do the same type of thing, but instead of calling, and so it should read all the user documents, right? Sorry about that. That is the recording. I just came out of a recording for our CS2 class, so kind of bouncing back and forth right now. This is good. And then this is going to be the get user, should read all the user documents. Cool. And then we're going to, instead of post, what do we need to do? We're going to be calling a, it's pretty straightforward, this one. Instead of calling .post, we want to call what over our user's endpoint? Get, right? We just want to read all the users. So that's pretty easy. And then we're going to send, okay. So instead of sending all the users, we're going to expect something to come back. And it's just going to be, or we're not going to send anything. There's no data. We're not posting anything, right? So that's kind of what that send does. Okay. So, but now we just need to read the users that come back as our users, as our response. So, cool. So once again, if there's an error, we can just simply return the error. Otherwise, we can just say, you know, we can just do our expect. So what types of things should we test for here? Well, we're going to keep our status open, make sure that we have a 200 response. But okay, and then the one-liner that I was wrong on yesterday, guys, check this out. That's what I was calling, and none of you corrected me on it. So there was no such thing as a res.username on the response object that I got back. I had to actually reference the body that came back. Okay, so that's why I was able to pass that test in a matter of seconds by the time I hung up on y'all. So, okay, and then, all right, so we just need to, we can test a few things here. So let's look at our data, and let's just console.log response, and then we can look at the data that we get back once we call it. So I have a Mongo instance up and running. So I'm just going to kill it real quick. I've been working in Mongo all day. I've been building an application. So if you're trying to reach out to me, I apologize. I've been swamped, like actually down in the trenches coding today. So, okay. And then if I want to go up on sudo mongod, point the DB path to data. Come on. Cool. Up and running, got our data. Let's run our server. Okay, up and running there. Let's run our test. And I'm expecting to pass one and fail another. What? I shouldn't have two passing. But we can see our giant object that we get back. But why do I have two passing? Why would this give me a 200? It's just going to give me 200 if I put this as a 400. 400, it's not found. I guess we have a route defined and we're just sending back, so it's going to be 200. So let's say our server, we're going to say res.send. So let's say res.status is going to give us a 422.send. And we'll just, you know, Oh, we want to send back, we'll just say users read. Okay, cool. So now we should be failing one of them. Oh, I have to run the test again. Okay, awesome. But okay, so this is good and all, that we have, okay, should read all the user documents, and we're actually failing because we're expecting that we should see that. So unprocessable entity, that's weird, it shouldn't be giving us that. Okay, that's fine, but anyway, maybe it's because I'm, yeah, that's weird, it shouldn't be. Unprocessable entity is 422. But it should say, instead of giving us an error though, well, I guess it is an error, it's a status code error. I don't know, I was just trying to get it so that we failed the test, because if I just say, 200 here, which is what was happening with the send, we're just sending back a positive test every time. Oh, now we're expecting 200 equal 400. So that's good. So that's our test right there. So cool. So we're getting a 200 back, our status came through. Since it was 422, it's unprocessable entity. So yeah. That's a good guess. Your guess is as good as mine right there. So, okay, so let's look at our object, okay? So instead of passing this, let's just not do any expects, and then console.log our object that we get back. Okay, so what I need to actually look at is the body that comes out of this object, okay? So the important part here is we look at that that body. Let's see, it's probably down here. There probably isn't a, oh yeah, it's empty. Cool. So that's good. That's what we're expecting right now. We haven't given it back anything. So, we need to make sure that whatever we call our assertions on, we call them on res.body.foobar, whatever. Okay. And then we'll just basically stub a couple of these out. First off, I'm going to do a type check on this body and double check and see what it is. And remember, that Mongo will return back an array of objects. Okay, so the document is just going to be an empty array if something's not there. So if I want to read all the users, how do I do that right here? So with our post, it was a little bit more complicated because we had to take in stuff. But what can I call from Mongoose to just find all the users? I already said it, so I already gave it away. So find all the users, just get them all here, and then we'll handle everything. Okay. And then users. Okay. And then, if there's an error, res.status, 422, something. And then I could say, I don't know, do we want to just copy, yeah, .send error, that's fine. So at least we always get something back, but cool. Otherwise, we're going to say, just a res.send all the users. So now this is where it gets fun. So we can run our test again. It's going to hit our endpoint. We're getting a 202 back. So, did we change the test back? Oh, we're not even, it's just a test, but it's just the assertions are done. Okay, but because of this, I want something to pass. Oh, I got rid of my console log. Result.body, right? Okay. So make the 200 equal 400. Okay, so here's our body. So check it out. Fred Flintstone was in our database, basically, okay, but was it really? No, it was actually in the test database because we populated it right here with the before each. So we populated Fred, so we're expecting the username to be Fred Flintstone, right? So before each, populate, okay, now go run our test. We have something in the database, we can read from it. But we're gonna mock all of this by hitting our API in a fake way, okay? So it's a little bit confusing because it's like, okay, what's actually giving me this stuff back? Well, it's your test suite. Okay, your test suite is actually giving you this stuff back because your test suite is saying before every single time we run a test, put something in our database so that we can test it, okay? So, and then it's like, okay, well now we're gonna go test our endpoint to make sure that it behaves in a similar fashion, but because we're piping it through this middleware of HTTP chai, or whatever it's called, chai HTTP middleware, we're actually able to mock that behavior and get that behavior out of it and read the database in that way, since we're just getting all the users. So what I'm going to say, it's an array of objects, right? I'm going to say expect that request.body to have length of 1, right? Because we want one object to be in there. Okay, so let's see if we're passing this test now. Hey, would you look at that? We're passing the test. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this console log because it's annoying. And then I'm going to try and break the test and run the tests. There we go. Expected array at 1 to have length of 2, but it got 1. Awesome. So we checked just by simply saying to have length 1, I checked the type of the data that came back. So it's an array because I'm asking for its length. Okay, or it could have been a string, I guess. But in this case, I know it's just going to be an array, so I'm cool with that test. And then I'm making sure that it has the amount of properties that we expect to see on it. And then we can say expect res.body at 0, so the first index in the array, dot username to be, or to equal Fred Flintstone. And let's say, you know, Ferd Flintstone. Just to break it first, you break it, then you fix it. So expected Fred Flintstone to equal Ferd Flintstone. Cool. Boom, solved the problem. All right, behavior expected. This is behavior-driven development. We're saying, hey, this is what we expect out of this endpoint as it's going to read our database. And we're mocking it all right here in the test suite. So populate our database, and then after this test run, so once we hit this done function, it's going to execute this after each and move on. It's going to say, hey, go and remove that user so we have a clean instance every single time. Okay? That's going to be pretty vital by the time we get into this next test. So let's just do our copy, paste. Perfectly valid. You can copy and paste. So yes, exactly. And here's why it will work, Satish, because you're operating on the same model, so your behavior will work the same. And so okay, for the recording purposes, let me just read out loud what Satish asked. So we write the test for the test database, but we finally expect them to work for the real database. And the answer to that question is yes, because you're basically setting up your test in a testing environment, and you have more control over that environment, but you're doing something that's the same. The behavior is all the same because you're operating off of the same model. So you're creating a new user instance. So look at this. So at the very top, we pull in our user, which is the same user model that we're going to be using in our production database, in our app. Okay. So you're basically able to mock off of that model. Okay. And then you're also leveraging the power of your API by using this chai HTTP middleware to mock your HTTP requests. So it's like, okay, give me the behavior out of that server on a get requested users, and then let's just figure out, let's make sure that, you know, we get some sort of error or response back from it. So you can write your errors in here, you know, and if we actually get an error, you know, at that place, then what's going to happen is you can basically test all of your error and your error handling and things like that before you even prop up your API. So it's a really, really cool way to like get the behavior-driven development piece out the window before you move into anything else. So, and I'm just doing this one piece at a time. So like I'll write the test and then I'll go and write the endpoint. I know a lot of people who will only write tests in their career, and then they'll pass those tests over to the development team, and then they'll have to write the endpoints for those tests. So I don't know what you prefer, like what came first, the chicken or the egg? In test-driven development, tests get written first. So you can easily make a career out of becoming an automation test engineer. Okay, yeah, it is a whole job. Okay, so what we need to do with this put is we need to say should update a single user document. Okay, this one's going to be a little bit trickier. And we're doing a put now, right? Put is our update endpoint. So, okay, what we need to do, we're going to use our Barney Rubble instance. And then, yeah, and then we're going to say, okay, so this is where we need that ID that we saved earlier, right? Didn't we do that yesterday? Didn't we save some sort of ID? Yes, we did. Okay, user ID right there. Okay. So we're going to send over our stuff. And we're going to say Barney. Okay, those are the things that we're going to use for our model here, our object that we're going to send forward. So now, much like the post, we need to send something. And that's going to be an object with the ID and the Barney. Okay. So you should have... Oh, it's got to be, what do we call it? User ID? Okay, there we go. So now, see, notice how with my text editor, I had something right here that was called ID, and it's like, oh, this could be anything. That's telling me that that's not a defined value. So if I go and I say user ID, and I hover on it by pressing command and hover over it, it's like, oh, this points to the user ID from above, which is, before each, it's going to be the saved ID that we get from our before each hook. It's a little hard to think about right now, but remember, as soon as we get a positive response on this user save query, as soon as we save our new user Fred to the database, we're going to store that ID here, and then we're going to send it up to our put request so that we can change it. I've seen put requests done different ways, where you actually like, you know, you have an ID parameter or something. Two companies, two different things. For us, we'll just send it up with our request body. So this is going to be rec.body in our endpoint, right? Okay. So now let's do that same thing. Our response. Okay, so all right, now we need to actually make our put endpoint work. So right now, if I were to say expect res.status to equal, actually I could just change the test below. I could say, I think I can just not in front of this, right? It's not a thing. Yeah, cool. Right on. So that way it's going to just fail. Cool. So expected 200 to not equal to 100. Nice. Awesome. So that's our first failing test for our put. It would just pass because res.send just gives us 200. It's just like it's sending back a string. So it's like, hey, this worked every single time. But now we need to destructure our rec.body. Okay. Who's ever written code backwards like me, just barely. So we're going to pull off the username and the ID. It's called user ID, right? You guys didn't try and stop me. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to write a query to actually update an object in our database. So we can simply go user.find by ID and update, right? And we can give it our user ID, and then we give it our update. We're going to say username. Well, I could do a lot of things here, but what's the easiest? Just username gets username. Is that going to work? Did anyone do theirs this way? We'll find out. Okay, let's run our tests. Our tests are going to call the endpoint, and we should see our request. dot body. That's what we're trying to do this. So right now it still is, let's see. So right now it's still Fred Flintstone. It didn't give us, oh, Barney. I need to say, what do I need to do here? So we didn't update anything. I'm going to say, I need to say Barney in my, which is dumb. I'm going to say username equals Barney dot username. So then once we pull username off of this, it actually sets that. So username still Fred Flintstone. Okay. How do I see if I actually sent it the right thing? Oh, username is right there, Barney Rubble. So Barney Rubble was right here. So we saw it. It logged it in my test suite, which is kind of crazy. Oh yeah, because we're using Morgan. Hey, that's a handy thing for Morgan. All right, it logged out whatever logged from my test suite file. It didn't log it in my actual server. So that's showing you like the tests are like running a clean instance of this stuff, right? Okay, so Barney Rubble was not set to the user's username. So I need to fix my query here. Does anyone, can I just do $set? Still getting back Fred Flintstone. That's not what we want. This updated user should be saved. We should be setting this. So for setting this query, did anyone have any bright ideas before I dig into some documentation? I mean, one way that I think I could solve this problem is just say updated user dot username and set it equal to username that came in. Kind of don't like that but maybe, I mean, since it's just JavaScript, it should just do that, right? And then just call updated user dot save. Once again, not a huge fan of this because I think there's a way to do it in an easier fashion. But yeah, now I'm going to say error and new updated user. Now what I'll do, since we just queried on this line, I can say, yeah, I wanted to do this all with find by ID and update, but I'm just going to leave it as find by ID. So it's going to be user, call user.save, get our request, error handling, Barney Rubble. So it actually made the update. See, that's what I was trying to do. Noah, I thought that would work, right? So it's like the subject and the description, but I must have just had something wrong with my syntax and Mongo wasn't actually failing for me. So we'll just move forward. We'll just do it this way. It's a little bit, so this is a little clunky to me. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Basically, all I did was find by ID and then just set a property directly on that object and save that to the database. Cool, we have the ability to do that because it's just JavaScript, but I think there's more semantic ways of doing it and less like explicit ways of doing it. So Cool. Let's just move forward because we got it to work. And then, red, green, refactor, right? So right now we're red. Let's turn this to green. So we're going to get a green test now. It's going to equal that. Okay. And then we want our username. So we're going to say, we can just do away with that. And we can say, respond. We don't need that 0 anymore because it's just an object now. Response.body username to equal, let's fail it. So if this was up, okay, it's going to be fail. We expected Barney Rubble to be Fred Flintstone, and boom shakalaka. All right, last one. And let's get rid of that console log. Cool. All right. So for a delete, basically the same stuff. It's a lot of repetitive stuff. Except we're actually going to delete something, right? And this one, we're probably going to want an ID. Okay. Should update, should delete. Okay. And we're going to send it. This is where I need to actually send the user ID itself. Template string it. And say, get rid of that. Okay, so now we're going to pull something off the params, do something with it, send the response back. Let's move our test back to not equal, and then keep our Barney Rubble here, because that should just not be defined. So expected 200 to not equal 200. If I can show you the skip now. So expect dot skip. Actually, that would have to be over the it. Never mind. Let's actually give it the 200 and then see what actually comes back. And right now, it's just a string that comes back. So expecting undefined, we don't have any body. The response would be, so if we were to pass this test right now, which it's just faking the API, right? We could say response.body, and that's just going to be a string, right? Don't we just have a string on there? Expected an empty object. Okay, so, all right, so response.body, and then it's going to be, eventually it's going to be an empty object, right? I don't think there's anything more to it than that. Let me think through this real quick. Make sure you pass the ID up, do the behavior, delete this document. That's going to be all done and handled in our stuff anyway, right? It's going to be handled in our endpoint. Okay. So for right now, we'll just make sure that it's deleted and that, well, one thing we could do right after we delete it. Okay, we'll make an assertion for this stuff. And, okay, to not equal. Okay, we'll make an assertion for this stuff. And then what we'll do is we'll actually, inside of our request here, we'll actually, after our, let me think about this. Think about what I want to do. Because what I'm saying is we'll actually query. So we'll say user.find and then pass in or find by ID, then pass in our user ID. So here's a good case for pseudocode, right? Because now I can think about the problem, okay? And then we can run our query suite on that. So if error handle else expect that results are null. So we'll query our very own database right before our eyes, our test database at least. Cool. How does everyone feel about that logic so far? Okay, we need to make sure we write our delete method in the proper fashion. So with remove, we take in our parameter. So I'm going to say const id equals rec.params. Okay. Then we're going to say user.find by ID and remove. And let's see what this one does for us. So it takes an ID, be a number or string, callback. It's equivalent to find one and remove, finds a matching document, removes it, passing the found document, if any, to the callback. Executes immediately if callback is passed, else a query object is returned. Cool. I don't know how many of you knew that you could do this. You just peek into the package. Very powerful stuff. And especially with like something that's well documented like Mongoose. Okay, so this is saying I just simply pass it the ID and a callback. I hope it's that simple. Else we're just going to say I hope it's that simple, guys. Just delete, just find by ID and remove. Okay, let us run our tests. See what comes back. Okay, check it out. We got a success. That means we sent back this user. So that means we can go and look at that user. And we can write another assertion on it. So I can say console.log rec.body. Oh, where is this still? Get out of here. Oh, test is failing, so we can't see the rec body. Oh, it's res body. And it should just be ID. Because we're naming that right here. That's where that variable comes from. Right? No whammies, no whammies, no whammies. ID is this long ID string. Oh, cool. Hey, look, we got our thing back. So Fred Flintstone was removed. Sweet. Okay. So I must have missed that earlier. Okay. Awesome. So now we can say expect that our whoops, what just happened? Cool. So we're going to try Barney Rebel first. Remember, this is the object that was removed. So we know it's Fred Flintstone, but it's failing because it's, oh, expected 200 to not equal 200. We're getting a success because it's actually, the endpoint's doing what we want it to. And, you know, we could go and say, hey, well, we expected Fred Flintstone to equal Barney Rebel. So let's Fred Flintstone it up. So honestly, if you get that success, oh, a time, let's see. Oh, We're not doneifying it. So if you ever see this exceeded 200 milliseconds, it's because your tests are not, they're going to hang up because they're actually looking for some sort of response. And so it's like, okay, we're continuously executing code. And instead of like sending a status back somewhere, which is what a server is supposed to do, we call done, right? So if you see that, it's like, you know, done needs to be called. Cool. So, okay, that's actually all I would do for a delete test. I think that's totally valid, because remember your delete endpoint is serving back the actual object that was removed, and then you could, I mean, since we're querying with a fake test database, I could just run in here, you know, just as I'm setting up these documentations or setting up these endpoints and stuff. And I could say, you know, I could query for, I could say Mongo, show DBS, okay, use test DB or show collections, and db.users.find, and if I just call that, nothing. So it's an empty collection. Cool. Okay, I don't want to eat into any more of your time. I feel like having 40 minutes tonight and then like an hour and a half to hour and 40 minutes last night with this stuff, like, and I wasn't even able to finish it all, like trying to get through it. Like it's dense stuff. Like this was a lot to work on. So what I encourage you to do is, as we move forward, as you get more free time, come back and look at all this stuff, and try and, you know, get to a place where you can actually start testing your models as well, because we didn't even set up tests for our models. But those are 4 very valid endpoints doing exactly what we want them to do, and they're fully tested. And then we have like some half-assed documentation. So, but yeah, now that I've discovered my killer documentation writer, I want to point you into something as well that I don't think a lot of people have had the chance to look at yet. Oh, this will be your tonight's video, by the way. Point you to this thing called Swagger. Now there is a community afoot, basically building towards what they call the Open API specification. And Swagger is a tool that will allow you to follow those Open API principles. So what this Open API specification is saying is that we have an opinion that all REST APIs should look like what we are saying. And I think it's actually really powerful. They have some really, really good cases. Now, who knows what REST is going to look like in the near future? Because there's a lot of tools out there that are like sort of taking the scene, and they're like, a lot of people are adopting them, and they're very, very popular. Like GraphQL is the killer of REST, is what a lot of people are saying. But this is probably one of the greatest sources of like the closest thing to a standard that we're going to get in the REST industry. And by REST, I mean, like, you know, there's various definitions of REST. For our definition, I would say, you know, it's create, read, updates, and delete, right? But if you get into this and you start reading through like what they're trying to do here, it's amazing. And then the API documenter, basically Swagger will allow you to tag your endpoints. It's just something as simple as like, and I don't have it set up or anything, but I could come in here and I could say like, you know, following Swagger syntax, and this is just pseudocode, like swagger.tag, you know, whatever. So users, and then you could say, you know, get, right? And then it'll automatically go read your code and create documentation for your endpoint. It's that powerful of a tool. So later on, as you continue to grow and develop and work on projects, definitely treat this with, you know, some respect, and, you know, give it a nod as far as like, you know, what's coming, and, you know, this idea of putting a specification out there for our endpoints. It's pretty cool. Anyway, that's enough. I'll stop boring you now. I'm going to give you the video. and it's right here. So this one is about 45 minutes long. You can watch it at normal pace, or you can speed it up a little bit, but we'll meet back in just under an hour, and we'll chat about some things. I'll answer some questions for you about React Native. So pretty cool stuff. This is gonna be really fun. I think you guys should be really excited about it. But I'll go ahead and I'll end this and I'll set it in the